Hello imaginative people, and welcome to the Christmas special of Brainstorium. Better late than never. I'm Anna Tizard, as ever your inspiration mystic, here to take your imagination to a whole new world of story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. But today there are no games. The last games and story brainstorms of 2022 are in episode 19. Today, in episode 20, let me take your imagination on a whole other journey into a new short story with a touch of fairy tale magic and a sprinkling of snow. So sit back, relax, and let's get Christmassy all over again. So it's a little later than I promised, but I've been getting through a horrible cold, and by now I think my voice is finally back to normal. The story I'm going to read is called The Bear and the Rediscovering Portcullis, and this was inspired by an Exquisite Corpse game result that came up in episode 18, which was the book-loving teddy bear solved the case of the Rediscovering Portcullis. Before I begin, let me quickly say another thank you to Paul Thomas, Paul Benfield, Fraser Armitage and Joseph Clark, who contributed the describing words, nouns and action part that made up this random sentence. I would never have written this story if it wasn't for your words mixing together in a particular way with the magical randomness of Exquisite Corpse. As regular listeners will know, anyone can send me words and phrases by going to my play page at annatizard.com to potentially inspire my next story or a story of your own. Now, this new short story has gone through quite a few changes. It's as if the Rediscovering Portcullis needed to rediscover itself. Anyway, are you sitting comfortably? Then let me begin. This is The Bear and the Rediscovering Portcullis. Squares of light. He'd never realised until now that light was made of squares. They were moving downwards, crisscrossed with black, thick frames. With a hop of effort, the bear rolled onto his side and scrambled upright on round, undexterous paws that slipped on cold flagstones. He steadied himself, then looked up. The light wasn't made of squares. That was just the grill of the portcullis. With a judder and a screech of old metal, it continued its descent. Some kind of mechanism was moving high above him, the chains clinking. Glancing up, he saw a lever in the corner of the archway, far too high for him to reach. Just beyond the portcullis, a big gate was swinging shut. The gap narrowed on a blaze of white light beneath the blue sky. Snow-covered fields. Houses peeped over the white hills like tiny faces. Into this bright landscape ran a short human figure. Her brown hair trailed like a tiny shredded flag in the sun. Was that a scream that echoed in his ears? The bear rested a paw against his heart, but did a double take. His fur was human-made material, not warm. How could he feel? The portcullis was almost 3/4 down, the gap still shrinking. He thought frantically, did he belong out there or in here? Was that his human, who dropped him by accident on her way out? He searched his memory for her face, for a place on a mantelpiece or a chair where she might have discovered him, but nothing came. The mechanism rattled on, closing the space between bear and freedom. Shaking himself of his stupor, he clambered through one of the grill holes, but he was too late. The portcullis clanged to a halt, and the outer gate groaned to a close. There was nothing in this in-between space but shadows and the faint scent of snow. Bear frowned. Was the girl in danger? Some memory, a deep memory, stirred within his chest. Something wasn't right about outside. Hazy collections of books, old armchairs, and children's drawings fuzzed the edges of his mind. But there was no point waiting here speculating. There had to be more clues behind him in the castle. He ducked through the portcullis and strode as best as he could with a short, stuff-limbed hobble, testing the spaces in his memory, feeling the flagstones against his feet. It was a grand corridor lined with tapestries, oil paintings of old battles, unused hooks and nails sticking out, and on the other wall, narrow windows. The sort that were meant for arrows, surely, but they'd been filled with glass. Of course, the castle was a replica, being reupholstered to become a hotel. Bear froze at this sudden knowledge as it crowded into his mind. How did he know this? But in that case, this place should be full of people and noise. Where was everyone? His beady black eyes swiveled to the thin triangle of glass. Outside it was pitch dark, night time. He took in a small, bear-sized gasp of air. But that meant... He swung around to stare at the portcullis and gate. The girl had rushed into sunlight. On the other side of that gate was another world. The hushed atmosphere of night was all around him now, like an old friend. As Bear hobbled along the corridors, his feet finding red carpet and Turkish rugs, the idea nagged at him. How did he get here? Where was he from? How many more memories might be waiting inside him to come out, and how could he get to them? If he was just a stuffed bear, how could he even be alive and thinking these things, making his way past door after door, muttering, "No, not that one. Not that one either." Perhaps it might come to him if he searched enough, investigated the castle for reminders of his past, though surely it was more important to understand what had happened to the girl. Her safety had to be his priority. When she'd dropped him or left him behind, had he been urging her not to go? If only he could remember. Certainly, dropping him by accident meant a hasty exit, and it felt familiar that little girls could be willful and in a hurry to have adventures, especially if there was fresh snow to run through. Each door was set into a stone arch. The wood was freshly painted, probably less than 2 years old. The stone around it, several hundred. The newness was placed so close to the oldness, it confused the place. The next door along was just the same, except that it had a laminated notice. Breakfast 7 to 10 a.m. If you would like a cooked breakfast, please place your order by 7 p.m. the night before. Bear took another gasp. He could read. He hurried as fast as his short, wide-set legs could take him, past armoury, under a chandelier, still lit at this hour, scattering glints over the red carpet, until he found the double doors that seemed so right, so indelibly there, that he hardly needed to read the sign to know it. The library. He stood marvelling at the doors, and wondered how long he might stand there before more memories of the castle would surely come rushing up from the night time of his mind. He pushed one of the doors. It wouldn't budge. He threw his little body against it, and it creaked, nothing more. "Please," he said, leaning all of his weight against it. His paws dug into the carpet. Finally, it nudged open, and he slipped through the gap under the pressure of a door that threatened to crush his small body. The door swung shut after him with a low thump, but not before he glimpsed thin, darker stripes in the corridor's bright red carpet. Dumbly, he stood staring at the closed door, then checked under his foot. Claws lined with bright scarlet. He peered closer, sniffing, before he let his foot drop. It was just fuzz from the carpet. But how did he come to have claws? What kind of a teddy bear was he? He must be an antique, very precisely made, that's what. He turned his attention to the library. Wooden shelves swept from floor to ceiling. Several brown leather chairs were positioned around the room, complete with matching footstools and glossy wooden side tables with a few choice books laid out. Designed for hotel guests with an eye for the slow-paced relaxation, it was history refurbished and reconvenienced for a modern clientele. But how could any of this be if the entrance was a portal to another world? A bigger arched window looked out onto the surrounding grassy area. The moon threw its cold light, but the blackness around it was starting to lift in deepening shades of blue. Whatever humans were staying here would begin to stir soon. Where could he hide? Somehow he knew that living teddy bears should not be seen by anyone but a child. But he couldn't leave now, not while that girl was out there in danger. This castle had a magic in it, that much was clear. He paused, his muzzle a quiver. He could almost smell the magic. And the answers had to be in here, a place packed with knowledge. He scoured the shelves, hardbacks and paperbacks catching the moonlight. Great Expectations, His Dark Materials, Easy Cook Casseroles. What was he looking for? Something that didn't fit, like him. He was straining his neck to look at all the shelves above him. There were so many. But what if someone had left out a clue for him? He felt it in the tingle of his fur. He was meant to be here and find something. If that were true, wouldn't it be left closer to his height? He hobbled past a glass-fronted cabinet, thinking that at least that was something to jump behind if someone burst into the library. On the other side of the cabinet, on the lowest shelf, a copy of Winnie the Pooh caught his eye. In between that and Goldilocks and the Three Bears sat a black box folder. He grappled with the end of the slippery box, tugging it into his stomach. Scratch marks showed on either side, just where his paws slid now, and he pulled back in surprise. Already more than halfway out, the box tipped on its side, spilling its heavy contents onto the floor. Papers, drawings clipped together. The drawings and writings of a child. The Adventures of Bear and Madeline announced a title in red felt tip. It was folded and stapled into a crinkled makeshift book. Holding his breath, Bear opened it and began to read. Once upon a time there was a haunted castle. But it wasn't just once upon a time. It kept appearing and disappearing on the hill, several times. A very, very beautiful young maiden called Madeline saw the castle from her cottage across the field. But her aunt couldn't see it, no matter how much Madeline pointed. Her aunt said she mustn't give in to silly dreams, but Madeline knew she wasn't dreaming and that the castle was magic. It wanted to show itself to her and her alone. Whenever she saw the castle on the hill, she ran as fast as she could towards it, but every time she got even close, it disappeared again, like a ghost. One day she woke up and saw that it had snowed. Everything was white. Madeline looked at the hill and the castle was there again. She ran up there, and this time the castle stayed real. She saw no one there, but the drawbridge came down anyway. The gates opened, and up came the portcullis. If you are the bear, go to the kitchen right now, but put these stories back first. Bear started upon reading this, and he almost dropped the book. This seemed to be a direct instruction to him, but surely that was a mistake. He read on. Don't let anyone see you. You must get to the kitchen before the witch goes in there at 8 o'clock. The second cupboard on the left-hand side has packs of iced buns in it. It's very important that you take one of these, a pack of 4. Then hide inside the cupboard closest to the portcullis. You can eat 3 of the buns, but you must leave one for me. The castle will let me in the morning. It knows me by now. Bear felt dizzy. Was this a story, or was it real? Should he follow these instructions just in case? But it was ridiculous. Books told stories or histories or facts. He read on. If you don't believe you're the right bear, check your paws. If you have red bits of carpet between your claws, You are the right bear, and this is your story." Bear let the paper book drop. Slowly, just to be certain, he took another look at his underpaw. Sure enough, red fluff from the carpet was still snagged between his claws. Shivering with disbelief, Bear leaned over the open page and read the last few lines. "Wait inside the cupboard until you hear me whisper for you. If Aunt Mabel is in a bad mood, I might be late. Be quick, don't be seen, and don't eat all of the buns." This last instruction was underlined in red pen. For a moment, Bear wondered why he needed to risk leaving the library to steal food when he'd be much safer hiding inside the cabinet right next to him. But there didn't seem to be anything for it than to follow the instructions and hope that this girl, Madeline, for surely the child was writing about herself, knew exactly what she was talking about. He rushed to the library door, then realised there was no way he could get out. It opened inwards, and the handle was far above his head. Footsteps in the corridor, muffled by the carpet. He froze. Bear's first thought was to get behind that cabinet, but it was halfway across the library. He'd never make it in time. Trembling, he flattened himself against the wall to the side of the door. The footsteps slowed, and the door opened. Bear put a paw over his mouth. A tall shadow fell on the floor. Hard heels took one step, then another. If the person looked down now, they'd see him. But hopefully there was plenty else to look at in this packed library. The woman walked straight on. The door began to swing shut behind her. Not this time, Bear thought, and darted for the gap just before it closed. He stood in the corridor, wondering how on earth he could be breathless and alive and following the instructions of a book handwritten by a mysterious child. The breakfast sign, that had to be the dining room, which must be next to the kitchen. This door swung both ways and didn't seem quite so heavy, or maybe it was just practice. Bear hurried over more carpet, carefully this time, retracting his claws, and through a small, even lighter swing door into what had to be the kitchen. Over the stone floor, turning left, and there was the cupboard. The packs of iced buns made his mouth water, but the rustling of the packaging as he dragged out a pack made it a painstaking, jumpy process. By the breakfast room door, Bear listened out for any signs of people before he barreled himself against it and made a dash for the cupboard closest to the portcullis. Safely inside, he stood panting in the darkness, though there was a little crack of light that fell on his paws and the packet of buns. But the footsteps came again, and for a while the distant sizzle of pans and a noisy kettle made the sound of cellophane seem like nothing. Bear couldn't be sure how much time passed before the footsteps went past again, and the portcullis then clanked once more. He stiffened, waiting. A small voice whispered close to the cupboard door. "Bear? I'm in here." The light made Bear screw up his face and hold a sticky paw to his eyes. A girl's voice exclaimed in surprise. Bear forced himself to look at her, a grubby face surrounded by wild brown hair. "You're Madeline?" She shook her head but said yes. She picked up the one remaining sticky bun, the packet sliding off. "This is the first time you've ever left one uneaten. Thank you." "The first time?" Bear repeated. "We normally have to sneak into the kitchen again to find more. So it is possible for things to change." She looked at him as if remembering he was there. "We're in a time loop, you know." Madeline took 3 bites of the last sticky bun and put the rest inside her pocket. "For later," she said. Tiptoeing along the corridor, she explained that the safest place right now was the library, although the witch would go in there at precisely 10:20. "The castle lets me in every day, ever since the first time. It opens by some kind of magic. I never see anyone doing it. But each day when I come back, she said, you're just like you are now. A small, confused teddy bear who doesn't remember a thing. She stopped and looked down at him solemnly. You're about to ask me what your name is, aren't you? Bear gaped. Yes? Because the same thing happens every day. She shook her straggly hair. I don't know your name. The fact is, you never tell me. Huh? But how could I tell you something I don't know? Madeline strode towards the library door, pulling him by the paw so fast he had to run to keep up. As the day goes on, you seem to know more and more. Sometimes you get this look in your eye, like you've remembered something important. When I ask you your name, you won't tell me. Bear spluttered in confusion, then stared at the door in an alarm. Oh, does the castle shrink during the day? This door looks smaller. The girl sighed. You say that every time. Look at yourself. You're growing. He looked down. His feet did seem that bit further away, the fur seeming longer. Madeline was smiling. Every day, the more you learn, the more you grow. It's something to do with this time trap, I'm sure of it. Like time is going round in a circle. I remember everything because I step outside each day and run home to Aunt Mabel. But every day, you start off brand new and can't remember. Bear whispered, How big do I get? Huge, she said. By tea time you're dangerous. Tall enough to pull that big lever for the portcullis, but too much for me to stay near you one moment more. Bear blinked. Could that be why he remembered a scream as she ran away? But that was too strange. Do I shrink when you're not here? She shrugged. You must do. Bear scratched his head. What does it all mean? The girl's face hardened. The castle wants us to know something. That's what we're here to find out. Come on. She shoved open the door and strode inside. Mind your claws on the carpet. Right. She turned around as the door bumped. You've taught me so much in this room. I have? You taught me how to read. No one in my village can read. How? How do I know anything? How to read? Bear stared at his paws in wonder. We don't know what we don't know, said Madeline, as if reciting a well-used line. But reading might help us find out. We've spent so long on teaching me how to read. We haven't done enough to solve the mystery. Only by now, she chattered on, as she reached for a book called Being and Time. I'm a bit worried that if we find out, the magic will be over and the castle will disappear and I won't see you anymore. What year is it in your village? Asked Bear. Madeline took a breath as if bracing herself for something. 1824. The number hung in the air like a ghost. Bear glanced around at the plush carpet, the books lined up on the shelves, the double-glazed window that had been fitted opposite them. That's a different time to this one, isn't it? She nodded. I think so. So many things here. That electric chandelier. There's a cleverness in everything, and it's not just because it's a rich castle made by rich men. She shook her head in awe. Bear tilted his head on one side. So how are we going to try and solve the mystery today? More reading? She looked at him. More thinking? How about exploring the castle, said the bear. We've done that 100 times, she said. 100 times? But I don't remember a single one. He put his head in his paws. Oh, who am I? Don't worry, Bear. You remember some of yourself by midnight. That's tea time in my world. I do? By lunchtime you start to recognise stuff, and then you go all quiet like you don't want to tell me. This was too strange for Bear to contemplate, as if he were another person, another part of the time. So instead of asking, he pointed at the book she was holding. What have you learned from Being and Time? That life is short, but the shortness can help make us our minds about what it all means, she stumbled, posing it as a question. And what if life is long and repetitive? Asked Bear. Madeline flipped the book open again, whisking through the pages. I don't think I've come to that bit yet. Bear put his paw on the edge of the book and drew it down so he could look at her face. Madeline, I doubt there's anything inside that book about time loops. This Heidegger person is a philosopher, not a science fiction author. I say we go exploring the castle and find something we haven't found before. She snapped the book shut and put it on the table. Fine, but we have looked everywhere, you'll see. And we can't go changing our usual route because that red-haired witch is pacing around the castle and we have to be careful not to get caught. Why? Who is she? I think she owns this place, but I don't understand it because she's not like a queen. She's got no servants, there's no one else here. I've heard her talking into a little black box about furniture deliveries and sample menus. The one time she saw you, she screamed the place down. That was a short day. You had to let me out early. And we couldn't do any more exploring. But when I came back the next day, of course she'd forgotten it all, so I'll never know, but I'm guessing you hid for the rest of the day. Anyway, you can't trust adults. As they crept into the hall, Bear murmured under his breath, You'll be an adult someday. Madeline turned back to scowl at him. Then I'll be extra specially careful of myself. They tiptoed past empty armour and tapestries that seemed to waver of their own accord, until Bear pointed out it was a wall heater that was making them move. They passed a staircase. Bear asked, Can't we go up there? Madeline twisted her mouth as she peered up into the gloom. She whispered, We might cause an echo. She took a tentative step. I'd have to carry you as well, she said. Bear almost laughed. I think you can manage. Look at the size of me. Yes, she said, gazing down at him. Look at the size of you. She took him by the middle and with a heave lifted him up to the same step. She was hardly a head taller than him. What does it mean? Bear said, louder than he meant to, and his voice skidded up the stone staircase until the whole castle seemed to be saying it back to them, jumbling his words along the way. What does it mean? Mean it does what? What mean it does? Bear moved his paws from his mouth just enough to whisper, Do you get the feeling that the castle is watching us and listening, and that it doesn't want us here? Madeline hesitated. The castle definitely wants us here, otherwise it wouldn't let me in every day, and it never lets you out. Bear started at this. I thought you dropped me, or I just didn't make it out in time. She shook her head. I told you you're dangerous by then, like an animal. I convinced you to pull the lever, but only just. Some kind of strange force holds you back, and it won't let you through, maybe to protect me. Bear stared, stricken by this. But you'll always come back, and you'll always be my friend, she said, taking his paw and urging him up the staircase. Along the upper floor's corridor, Madeline shook her head at every door, saying they'd already looked in them, until they reached a much smaller one with a dull-looking handle. She opened it, but Bear insisted in creeping in first. The light switch wasn't working, and the room was full of shadows that leaned towards them. Strange shapes jutted at them, a peculiar jumble of angles. For a moment, Bear thought he saw a large bone, but it was too curved. As Madeline opened the door wider, it threw a shadow on the wall behind. Madeline, stop. He held out a paw. But it was too late. The open door threw light over the shapes. Animal heads stared vacantly at them with glassy eyes. The girl screamed. The whole castle echoed, carrying her scream higher, further, deeper, into the never-ending recesses of this stone labyrinth. It's okay, said Bear, looking right at her. They're hunting trophies, taken down from the walls. The eyes aren't even real, they're glass, look. He tapped one with his claw, but it was still a horrible thing to do. It was the head of an animal who'd once been running freely around the forest and had been shot down and mutilated for the sake of a trophy. Madeline let out a sob, only to let in a gasp. "It's not okay," she said. "I hear footsteps. The witch. Hide!" For a few tangled seconds they scuffled by the door, each one trying to run the other way, but Madeline shook her head. There was no time for her to explain why so many of the rooms were such poor hiding places. "Let's just get in here," cried Bear, pulling her into the walk-in cupboard, even as Madeline squealed under her breath. "Face the other way, I've got your back." Not a moment too soon, they backed inside and pushed the door closed. There was nothing but silence, their hushed breath, an antler sticking into Bear's back. Footsteps. The sound might have been the thump of Madeline's heart until it was so close and so clear it couldn't be denied. "Oh well," thought Bear, "I guessed we'd have to meet the witch sometime." He braced himself, holding the shivering girl close, wishing it could be a more dignified meeting. But why would he think that? There was no time to puzzle it out, because the footsteps had halted outside the door. Madeline was stiff as a mannequin. The handle squeaked and the door swung open. A face, half covered by a blue bejewelled mask, stared back at them. "Madeline," she breathed. "How do you know my name?" said Madeline. "Come out and I'll tell you everything," said the woman. "Don't be afraid." Taking the girl's hand, she turned back to Bear and said, "I'm sorry, but please could you wait here while I explain a few things? We'll stay close by so you can hear us. But don't think too much while you're in there. I need to be able to reason with you." Too baffled to reply, Bear watched in dumb silence as the door closed gently and he was left in darkness. But the urge to burst out of there was calmed by the sound of Madeline's voice, as promised, just a short distance away. "Why have you locked him in there?" "I haven't locked him in. I've just asked him kindly to stay." The woman's voice was calm and something else. Something else. "He's not an animal. He doesn't do what you tell him to." Madeline stamped her foot. "Who are you and what do you want?" Her tone was demanding, but Bear could hear the tremble of fright in her voice, and he braced himself. He waited, holding back. The moment there was any sign of danger, he'd come out. But the way the woman had asked him to stay, so politely, it was strange. Something magical was afoot, and if he burst out now, he was sure the spell would be broken. The woman's voice came again, composed and careful. "The bear must not see my face, not yet." A twang of elastic. Was she taking off her mask? Bear's fur itched with curiosity. Madeline spoke again, her voice more hesitant. "Are you my real mother?" "No, but you see the likeness?" "Yes, but who—" "I am you. You are me." "It's not possible," cried Madeline. "Anyway, your hair's red." "I dyed it." "You can't dye hair like that, not like clothes. I don't believe you." "There are a great many things around you right now that are hard to believe in the 19th century. Softer now, uncertain. "What do you want?" "Only the very best for you, dear child." As Bear listened, knowledge began to creep over his skin. It thrilled his fur. His life as a man. Not just a man. A modern-day wizard, posing as a businessman. And yet here he was, stuck, a bear in a cupboard. A pang in his heart as he remembered Madeline, this Madeline, a woman in her 30s, so elegant in a black dress that she took his breath away, giving a speech in a conference room. So confident, her eyes sparkling with intelligence at the audience, who hid their envy behind complimentary cocktails. More memories thundered through his blood. A whirl of encounters with Madeline, of almost dates. There were always other people around whenever he tried to arrange a pub or a restaurant where they might be alone together to get to know each other. Was she playing hard to get? But she was rich, Of course, anyone that successful had to be cautious around interested strangers in case they were after her money. Mark Ridley, that was his name. Alternative therapist and mental health coach, although the words, when he saw them on his newly printed business cards, felt jarring, false. No one could really know how he channeled his health-giving magic into talking therapies and what he hoped would pass as a range of herbal tinctures. And Madeline, this talented, wealthy woman, much too grounded in reality, she might see him for the fake he was. So rather than just let it happen by accident, he took a risk and told her the truth outside a noisy pub one night. In the back of the taxi, her eyes were bright with fascination. But was she fascinated by him or just by magic? In her hotel's lounge, long after the staff had gone to bed, they spoke urgently well into the night. She told him of her fairy tale dreams and of a castle full of books and half memories. Perhaps it was a past life. Being an orphan who'd never known her parents, shunted from foster home to foster home from the age of 11, with little memory of her life before that, perhaps he could help her explore this and find her roots. For too long she'd been frightened to try, in case her mind was protecting itself from some terrible memory. But could she, should she try to recall it with his help? Memories are context dependent, he said. A castle in the country, but somewhere you can stay. I know just the place. They travelled together. He was dizzy with the idea, though unsure what to make of it. It was a replica castle, built on a hill by an eccentric in the 1960s, now privately owned by an old friend, a fellow wizard, and up for sale. They stayed at the castle in separate turrets, meeting for lunch and dinner and going for walks in the grounds. But in between marvelling about an almost constant déjà vu, Madeline talked about business and wanted to invite some friends. Now they were there, she seemed distracted, even reluctant to try his therapy. Wherever they walked, she'd turn around and stare at the castle, saying how magical it looked and how it was just like something she'd dreamed, but covered in snow. Mark realised that instead of falling in love with him, Madeline had fallen in love with the castle. It turned him inside out. It made him wild. After a night sipping wine in the library while she pored through the books, Mark swallowed a mix of tinctures to numb his mind. Later that night, he loped into the forest, a beast, utterly changed, perhaps forever. But the castle was a strange place, with a magic of its own. The sounds of the present wafted back to the bear in the cupboard. Though he was dizzy with memories, he listened for adult Madeline's voice, steadying himself with a paw against the door. "The magic's come full circle at last," she was saying. "I think this is the last time you may come to the castle now that the circle is complete. You must leave before it's too late. It remains only for you to follow your instincts, to find the other portal when it comes, however that may appear. It's a talent of ours, to find ways through, to find ways." "But what are you saying?" Girl Madeline cried, then lowered her voice. "I can't just leave right now. Will I ever see Bear again?" "Yes, but he will not be as you see him now." A pause. "I suppose I knew that." "There's so much more you'll come to know. A whole other life in the 21st century. It will be nothing short of magic, I promise, though there will be times of great hardship, especially to begin with. What you will need is trust. Trust in yourself, even when you're not sure who that is." The words echoed strangely in Bear's head. He was Mark. He was a bear. Nothing more than a soft toy, like a thing made in a factory. Yet he had a life. How could this be? His magic had gone wrong. More than that, it had been manipulated by something in this castle. Or by Madeline, adult Madeline. But she wasn't a witch. Girl Madeline had just assumed she was when she didn't recognise her own adult self sauntering around the castle. And yet here he was, still trapped, more trapped than ever, while the two Madelines outside discovered two halves of one life, at his expense. A deep growl made Bear shiver and cower against the door. Was something in the cupboard coming alive? One of these mutilated animals? Not quite dead? The sound came again and he froze, realising the sensation in his own throat. He pawed the door, not sure what to do. Adult Madeline's voice was quick and urgent. "Go now," she said to the girl. "Look for the portal on a misty day when you are 11 years old and have lost all other hope. It's all I remember, so it's all I can say." "What about Aunt Mabel? And Bear, can't I even say goodbye to him?" "Not now, it's too late. Run!" Bear didn't know what made him do it, but his vision had blurred around the edges. Rage pumped through his veins as he threw himself against the door. It collapsed on the floor, a flimsy, rather small piece of wood. The woman was rushing down the staircase. As she turned the corner, he saw she had her mask on again. Bear lumbered after her, his roar echoing. A second pair of human footsteps clattered down below. Girl Madeline had made it to the ground floor already. He roared again. How dare this woman take the girl away from him, his only friend, the only key to who he was? Some part of his mind understood there was something else, another set of memories, but they seemed as unsatisfactory and half-real as the business cards this memory man held. All that seemed like a story now. Here he was, a bear, bigger perhaps, but the creature he'd become. The creature he deserved to be. Another growl lurched from his throat as he loped after the woman, half knowing she was at once the one he loved, the one who had rejected him, and had taken away the only friend he knew. They both ran, the woman stumbling, toward the prison-like grilles of the portcullis where Girl Madeline cowered. She screamed and leapt for the lever in the corner, but it was way beyond the girl's reach. The woman collided with the portcullis and grabbed for the same lever, yanking in desperation. "It never opens for me," she muttered, then turned to face the bear, even as she shuddered into the corner. With her free hand she pulled off her mask. The bear dropped to all fours, padding the floor, teeth bared in a snarl as his long claws clicked on the flagstones. The woman gasped, "Madeline, have you still got that bun, the sticky bun?" Curled into a ball in the opposite corner of the arch, Girl Madeline fumbled in her pocket and tossed the half-eaten bun toward her adult self, who caught it, then wedged it on the lever. She ducked away just as the bear swiped, but the bun had given the bear pause. More thoughtfully this time, he swiped at the sticky mass lodged on the lever, and though he hardly pushed it, the lever came down as if all it wanted was his touch. The portcullis began to crank up with a jangle of metal. "Run!" cried the woman, and the girl crawled under the spikes as they lifted. Cold air and light blasted through the gate. The bear seemed to half understand that his friend was leaving him and roared furiously. But as the girl became a shrinking figure in a field of snow once more, adult Madeline leaned forward to stare straight into his eyes. "Today you will know me, and you will know yourself." He grunted in surprise. Then slowly he began to change. Memories had thrilled his fur once, and now, at the sight of this familiar face, knowledge shuddered through him again until his forelegs became arms. His pelt shrank into his skin and disappeared, and he, Mark Ridley, was stroking the bristle on his unshaved but thoroughly human face. "Madeline, I remember you. I remember me. Why did any of this happen?" "I don't know," she said. "Perhaps we'll never know. The castle, it does something with time, and it has a will of its own. Perhaps it wanted to show me." She looked at him with an intensity he'd never seen before. "What?" "I was lonely when you went away. And when I put in an offer to buy this place off your friend, time just dragged on and on. It was only by writing a journal that I began to understand I was trapped in the same day, and the girl tiptoeing round the castle was me, and that you—" She stroked his face, lingering on his bristle. "Feeling that I'd known you before, in another life. The dreams I'd had of this castle, of how I first learned to read. It began to make sense. It was history remaking itself." Mark's heart leapt in his chest, but he didn't dare let himself believe what this meant for him. Not yet. "I'm sorry if I frightened you." He looked outside. "Poor Madeline. I mean, you as a girl. Will she be okay?" The portcullis and gate stayed open, as if the castle was willing them to watch the little figure disappear over the hill. "She had to go before you changed back," said Madeline. "She couldn't see you as you are. She couldn't know our story, for that's her future, and it might not happen if she's self-conscious about it and recognises you later. If she knew you were coming, she wouldn't live the same life." They both watched the little figure receding into the distance. "Her experiences and her hurts must be the same as mine, or I won't be the same person now, and we will never reach this moment." "What moment is that?" She leaned in and kissed him. "The moment when everything finally makes sense. Do you hear that, castle?" She touched the stone walls, but Mark was reluctant to let go of her other arm. "Do you really think it can understand you?" "Your wizard friend definitely put a lot of magic into this place," she said. Mark pulled a face and then laughed. "It might have been more of a spillage. He's a potions enthusiast, always getting himself into trouble, and clumsy." "We must invite him round one day," she said, "for tea or coffee or some other liquid that won't risk more than a stain to the carpet." "And now?" He held her hand more tightly. "After all this time," she said, "I think we've found something worth holding on to." And so they stood on the precipice of a long-gone past and the brink of a new day. At the teeth of the portcullis, it seemed their time had come. But who or what was the will of the castle? I hope you enjoyed The Bear and the Rediscovering Portcullis. Let me know if you have any comments or feedback at annatizard.com. I'd love to hear what you think. The story hasn't been through much editing at all because there just hasn't been time, so I'll be very open to hearing what you think worked or what didn't work. If there are any unexplored directions you think I should try, let me know. So that's all I've got for you in 2022, but please note I will also be taking a short break at the beginning of 2023. I've got so much writing to catch up on, many short story drafts which I need to sift through to select the best ones and develop those so that I'm more or less caught up on myself before we launch back into more Exquisite Corpse gameplay in February. Yes, I did say February. There won't be a brainstorm during January 2023. But if you'd like more of my stories in the meantime, if you feel you need a dose of deeply weird fantasy while I'm gone, there are lots of places online where you can find and read my fiction in the meantime, and some of it's for free. Everything can be found on my website at annatizard.com. For starters, if you haven't already downloaded your free copy of The Midnight Ship, that is on my homepage, and the cover is just beautiful, so download it just to admire my cover designer's artwork. But apart from my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, you might not know that if you go to my Other Fiction tab, there are various other stories and publications featured there, and some of them are free to read on my site. Examples include The Religion of Biscuits, a flash fiction story which I wrote some time ago, but you might not have come across before. It's incredibly deep and rather silly at the same time, so if you fancy that kind of flavour, head on down to my other fiction page at annatizard.com. There's also a more sinister story called The Gloves, about a pair of gloves with very dark magic, also free to read on that page. And for something much lighter, a wistful, colourful story about a ghost on a pirate ship. Not dark at all, I promise you. This was published by a magazine called For Page and Screen, but their magazine is free to read online, and I have a link to that on the same other fiction page. I should mention the story also includes a sentient cabbage. Yes, you've guessed it, that one was inspired by an Exquisite Corpse. There aren't enough sentient cabbages in fiction, I feel. Of course, if you haven't already subscribed to my Deeply Weird newsletter, this is how to get your free ebook of Volume 1 in my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse. And when you subscribe, you'll also get a free exclusive short story called Barely Composed, about a young composer who meets the demon of death metal. And that really is a subscriber exclusive because I've deliberately not published it anywhere else. So if you haven't already, subscribe today. So lots to discover on the website during my absence from Brainstorium. And while you're there, why not send me a few words on my play page so the Socks of Destiny are well stocked in time for my return in February, because I'm going to need more story fodder. I think I'm going to be on a bit of a mission when I come back. So please pop on by to annatizard.com, have some fun, subscribe, read some short stories, but also send me some words for new ideas in the new year. Until then, while it might feel a little bit belated, we are still in the holiday season, and I feel my mandolin speaks for both of us when it says, have a good one and see you next year.